Hello, Naftali Picard here, Prunedale, California, August 4th, 2018. The topic of this short clip is the free market system. The free market system, also called capitalism, also called laissez-faire economics, this sort of thing. Chicago School of Economics, Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, Friedrich Hayek, the von Mises Institute, originally in Austria, but now in the United States of America, a think tank, a free market think tank. These sort of concepts are really easy to understand. They're often not explained very well at all. I'll give you the negative first, the non-example. When people describe the free market, they very often look at it opaquely. It's almost like one of those restroom windows. They don't want you to see the naked body, so the light penetrates the window, but you can't see anything through it. And so you can't make anything out whatsoever. So when people describe it, they're looking at it through a certain filter, and they're describing cronyism and corruption. They're not describing the free market. Like we have the free flow of ideas under the First Amendment. We also have the free market, which the concept is the free flow of commerce, right? This is my cool shirt I bought in Rome 2017. I love this shirt. So it's like a language, right? So we have prices and purchases. You have consumers, you have producers, and you have all the middlemen in between, right? The truckers that get the products to the stores, and you have the stores that decide what kind of market they're living in, right? So for example, I often go to the Starbucks in Prunedale where I live, and I like the coffee there. When I was in Europe this past summer, I want to say it was Czech Republic, Prague, but anyway, one of those places I found a Starbucks, and I went in there and I really wanted American coffee. I didn't like these little small lattes and espressos that are thick and small in Europe. I figured, Starbucks is an American company. Yeah, I'll get American coffee. Lo and behold, they just were serving the European clientele. And so I couldn't find a regular coffee in Starbucks. I had to settle for one of those small little thick espressos or whatever. And so I'm not a coffee elitist at all. And obviously, I wanted the American coffee, but my one purchase would not keep a business afloat. It makes sense. The company has to make there has to be a margin of profit involved. But anyway, in the free market, there's this constant communication between the producer and the consumer and the middleman as well. Let's say, for example, you go into Safeway to buy a dozen of eggs. Now, I have no idea how much eggs cost because I live in the country and my neighbor gives me his chicken eggs for free. But let's say that a dozen of eggs is $3. Well, the market has determined it's around $3. Maybe some are $2.90. Maybe some are $3.05. I don't know. Maybe you want to have eggs that were eggs from chickens that were fed organic feeds and they're cage free. So perhaps you'll spend $4 or $4.05 on a dozen of eggs. But still, no one is going to buy a dozen eggs for $6 or $7 if the market is around $3 for the basic product with no add-ons, right? So it stands to reason that the company is not going to try and charge more because no one's going to buy their product and you'll keep walking, right? What is the company has choices, right? The producer, the middleman, the marketers, they have choices. They can, go to a different product. They can use materials that aren't as good, but then you run the risk of people will stop buying your sneakers or whatever your product is if the materials aren't as quality oriented. A lot of choices we make. The free market is all about choices, and the choices between, ultimately the person in control is the buyer, the purchaser in the free market, because the purchaser constantly communicates to the producer, I want this or I don't want that, or I want this at a certain price. Makes sense, right? I think the distinction to make is between coercion and voluntarism, because under the free market system, everything is completely voluntary. No one puts a gun to your head and says, buy this particular dozen of eggs or buy eggs at all. When you're going to the grocery store, you're picking and choosing what you wish to buy, okay? There's no coercion involved. And when you go to the sneaker store, when you go to the clothes store, or which store you go to, these are all choices that you make, and they're good, right? You really are in the driver's seat. The purchaser's in the driver's seat, right? And it's the producers that are constantly jockeying up and down to determine what exactly can I sell that you wish to buy, okay? Completely voluntary. The opposite would be a command economy, and command economies are communist and socialist, and we have a mixed economy in the United States. But when the mixed economy becomes more command than free, you have a lot of problems. You have the thwarting of businesses, the sluggishness of commerce, which doesn't serve anyone's purposes whatsoever. So the free market is about voluntarism. And the other thing is that on the other side, the command economy side, a supreme dictator, many committees, they always get it wrong. They cannot make the decisions as to what to produce, or how much grain do the Ukrainians actually want? How many cars should we produce for the small oligarchy in the former Soviet Union? There were a class of people actually that did have cars, despite the fact that communism is supposed to have no leaders. So the point is that the people at the top-down sort of command economy folks, certainly cannot make the correct decision because they don't have all the information. Imagine that you want to go into 7-Eleven and you're thinking about a Diet Coke and a sandwich. Then you decide on the way in there, maybe I'll have a protein shake and then I'll get a bag of potato chips. Then you're at the cashier and you decide to make a different choice. So it's kind of finicky. We consumers, we're changing our minds a lot. Even if you had a supercomputer that was better than the human mind, I think that's impossible actually, you couldn't plug the information in fast enough because it's not only you that's going into the 7-Eleven, but there's millions and millions and billions of people that are all around the world or in these countries making these decisions what to buy and what not to buy. It's very spontaneous, it's very organic, and it's very voluntary. Okay, so the top-down folks in the command economies and whatnot simply always get it wrong, and it usually ends up, I think it always ends up in mass starvation and deprivation, people moving their land, people not only having what they desire, but they not having what they desire, but lacking what they need. There's a difference between a want and a need, a desire and a need, but when it comes down to it, they end up lacking what they need for basic subsistence, for survival. On the other side of the coin, which is the free market, you have people that we're making the decisions, and it's a relationship because every producer and every middleman and every purchaser is constantly jockeying for different prices and what's best for him or her. It's called self-interest, and self-interest is good. Why should committees care whether you buy eggs or not, what kind of eggs you buy, what kind of sneakers you buy, or whether you even wear sneakers? Who cares? This should be a bottom-up individualist choice without government interference or regulation. It really should. The free market always gets it right because it's always calibrating. So you're constantly calibrating, you're constantly adjusting, you're constantly tweaking prices, materials, and so forth, and there's small gradations and small adjustments, right? Small calibrations that cannot be made by committees without enough information. So it's this sort of organic, free flow, millions of people 24/7 making decisions at stores and the internet that are driving all the different surplus, the quantities, things that are pulled out of the ground, things that are grown from the ground, the truckers that move the products, the people who stock the stores. This sort of thing, it's always also attached to supply and demand as well, and it involves the workers and the prices you get for the industry and what you do to basically sell yourself for profit, right? That's how you make an income, that's how you support your family, you buy your house and you invest your money. All these things are tied to some extent with the decisions we make with regard to purchases and prices, okay? And so the free market, if it's left alone without the burden of the heavy hand of regulation, always gets it right because it's constantly making calibrations, very minute calibrations that committees simply can't do it. And this is exactly why we have to thank Great Britain for the Industrial Revolution and its laissez-faire economics. The government of Britain at the time, they were going to honor your natural rights. They'll help protect your property when they can. But they did not get involved in regulations and government regulations and business. And France, right across the English Channel, had far more resources and a much larger country than the island of Britain. Because Great Britain had a laissez-faire mentality, because there was a free market there and capitalism in Great Britain, you had the Industrial Revolution. Coal, yes, it's true that coal was, easily accessible from the ground. There were rivers and waters for power and for transportation, but France had that as well. You just had no interference at all during that laissez-faire period of Great Britain. Again, the United States of America has a mixed economy now. I don't know if we'll ever get the free market back again. I hope we do. I'm trying to be practical though. But as much free market as we can get, as much laissez-faire, hands-off from the government we can get, the more we will prosper as a people, right? And the poor in America live better than a lot of people in a lot of countries. For example, I have a friend who came from Mexico when he was 22 years old. He's now a math teacher. And he says that the poor in the United States of America live like the middle class in Mexico. And he went to college in Mexico, so he understands Mexico very well. So let me say that again. The poor in America live like the middle class in Mexico, according to my friend who came here when he was 22 years old from Mexico. What happens is that at least we have a history of the free market, and Mexico not so much, right? So yes, the free market is superior. It liberates human beings from the drudgery of subsistence, from living from one day to the next. And all the calibrations that are constantly happening, apart from government intervention, are constantly calibrating everything beautifully and precisely in a way that the elite and the committees can never get it right, okay? So on the one hand, command economy, interference, you get deprivation, you get starvation, you get basic wants are not being met. And there's lots of examples around the world of this. And then in the free market, you get, the beautiful thing called liberty. You get people are prospering, and when you have your needs are met and your wants are met, people are freer because money means liberty. And President Reagan said, "A rising tide raises all boats." So yes, under the free market system, there's going to be inequality. So what? There's inequality, so there's going to be some millionaires and billionaires and some middle class and some working class. That's fine. But if we look at the principle of a rising tide raises all boats, which is true, when the economy is doing well and we have more and more millionaires, we want more millionaires. We want more billionaires. We don't have enough. Why? Because a rising tide raises all boats. That means when we have more billionaires and millionaires, the poor people in America have a better life. Some would say they're not even poor. I mean, if you're poor in America, for example, you're probably living in probably a very crowded apartment, but you have heated water, you have heating, you might have air conditioning, you probably all have cell phones, you probably all have computer access. My mother and stepfather went to Santiago de Chile, the capital of Chile, South America, a number of years ago, and said the poor around the airports in Chile, they were living in shanty towns underneath cardboard and corrugated steel. They were peeing and crapping in the streets. They had bare feet. She said she had never seen poor. My mother said she had never seen poor like she saw in the shanty towns built around the airport in the capital city of Chile in South America, okay? So being poor in America is just a better deal, okay? And our poor is lifted up and have better standards of living when we have more money going to the top as well. So do we want equality of income? Do we want everyone to make exactly the same? No, we don't. It's just not possible. But we want more money flowing into the country, even if we do get more millionaires and billionaires. That's wonderful because it brings up the poor and it brings up the middle class. Everyone benefits by having more money flow into the country. And to the extent that we have more free market, we have more money flowing into the country. So again, the free market is individualistic, it is autonomous, it is precise, it involves constant calibration, constant negotiation, constant adjustment on a million different levels. It's a steady stream of communication between the purchaser, the producer, and all the people in between. It's a beautiful thing. Constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly making little adjustments, as opposed to the other side of the story, which is the command economy side, that mentality, in which things are being controlled by committees in government, which always gets it wrong. And I hope I've covered it all, and I hope I've cleared up the issue, and I hope that you can appreciate the beauty of the free market system at this point. Thank you and have a good day.